Money stuffed in my sofa, a treasure untold. Cyril's got a game ranch, stories unfold. Phala Phala, ritzy joint.
Greetings, folks. Welcome back. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. South Africa's Constitutional Court today has delivered a ruling that will shake the very foundations of South Africa's purported democracy. The Constitutional Court has placed Cyril Ramaphosa under parliamentary investigation over Phala Phala. The court has determined that Parliament must investigate whether Ramaphosa should be removed over the Phala Phala incident. For those of you that don't recall this, back in February 2020, Cyril Ramaphosa had a guest at his game ranch, Phala Phala. The guest was a Sudanese businessman who came there with $580,000 in U.S. currency delivered to Ramaphosa's ranch. The money was not declared to customs or immigration, a violation of South African law. The money then was apparently stuffed in furniture, a sofa at the game ranch. One of the domestics working at the game ranch then later apparently colluded with some folks from Namibia, apparently relations of hers, and they decided to rob Phala Phala, which they did. Afterwards, purportedly, Ramaphosa had the VIP protection unit or the crime police, someone, investigate this, and then they colluded with Namibian police officers to kidnap the suspects from Namibia, who were spending the money like there was no tomorrow, bring them back to South Africa, purportedly torture them, extract confessions, and then also purportedly gave them bribes not to tell anybody that this happened. Pretty frightening stuff when you think about it, all linked to a sitting president. Now, this judgment today, the 8th of May, 2026, has the effect of the Constitutional Court ruling that the National Assembly's rule allowing premature termination of the impeachment process is unconstitutional. But then this is the ANC, the African National Congress. Unconstitutional is their middle name. Expropriation without compensation. The law recently passed and promulgated allowing government officials at the national, provincial, and local level to steal your property, not just land, is the law of the land, despite the fact that it's in clear violation of Section 25 of South Africa's Constitution, promulgated and enacted by a majority black government. Of course, members of the Government National Unity, famously Dean McPherson, believes that nil means something. Apparently that gentleman has never learned the English language. The court has invalidated the December 13th, 2022 vote, which the ANC used its supermajority to push through a cancellation of the inquiry. There was an independent commission that investigated this, and then the report was shot down before an impeachment was ever considered. The Constitutional Court delivered this long-awaited ruling today, found that Parliament's rules must be effective in holding the president accountable, and effectively restarted the impeachment process. They set aside the National Assembly's rule that allowed it to vote on whether to proceed with an impeachment inquiry or not. And this is going to upset an awful lot of ANC politicians. It all started back in June 2022, a couple years after the event occurred, when Arthur Fraser, who was then the Director General of the State Security Agency, opened a kidnapping and money laundering case against Cyril Ramaphosa, the Presidential Protection Unit leader, Major General Raleigh Rood, and crime intelligence members for concealing the crime and then covering it up and all the other things associated with it. As I said, $580,000 of cash in U.S. currency was stolen by the Sudanese businessman Hassim Mustafa, who came to the ranch in a limo on Christmas Day, 2019. And the money was stolen in February. Why did the cash sit from Christmas until February before it was stolen? Not put in a bank, never declared to Customs and Immigration? And why has the National Prosecuting Authority not preferred charges against the people involved? If not Ramaphosa, his ranch manager? Clearly crimes were committed here. Also, the bull that Mustafa purportedly purchased, he never took possession of it. It never left the game ranch. As I said, on 13th December 2022, just days before Ramaphosa was reelected at his party Congress, they used their power in Parliament, their majority, the ANC, to shoot down this inquiry. Now, that inquiry would have led to determine whether Ramaphosa should be removed over Phala Phala. The inquiry had been chaired by panel leader Chief Justice Sandile Nkopo, and that panel found prima facie evidence that Ramaphosa had a case to answer for. In other words, there was sufficient evidence here, basically like a grand jury, to impanel. This could have been a grand jury, and there was sufficient evidence to issue an indictment in American sense. 14 months later, the economic freedom fighters brought their application to the court, joined by the African Transformation Movement, who first took umbrage with this. The court found the EFFs had delayed for too long, but they weren't going to prejudice any of the respondents or impair the court's ability to adjudicate the matter. So although the EFF took too long, 14 months, to bring this to the court said the issue is bigger than the tardiness. Now, majority judgment was penned by Chief Justice Mandisa Maya, along with former acting Deputy Chief Justice Busile Matlanga and Justice Owen Rogers and Leona Thron, all concurring. Majority found that enabling the National Assembly to halt the process before an impeachment committee could even investigate the removal motion that an independent panel found to have substance is an ineffective mechanism to hold the president accountable, as it undermines accountability and transparency. So basically, they're allowed to terminate the investigation, but the way that they did it here was inappropriate. So as part of this judgment, the court has set aside that rule and found that the National Assembly's vote was tainted by an invalid rule, and therefore the vote. Concord has overruled Parliament here. This is the judicial system holding Parliament accountable. This is the judicial system exercising checks and balances against Parliament, saying that it was inconsistent with the Constitution and referred the independent panel's report to an independent committee. The court also ruled that the National Assembly's rule must be changed so that when an independent panel finds that there is sufficient grounds to proceed with an inquiry, the president is provided a copy of the report and that the report is then automatically sent to the impeachment committee. Now, don't get too excited about this, folks. This doesn't mean Ramaphosa has been found guilty of any crimes. It doesn't mean that he's going to be removed from office, impeached. It doesn't mean any of that. It means an impeachment process must go forward now and determine whether they have to have a vote on him. And more disturbingly, there's a minority judgment. 11 members of this court, and 4 of them were the majority, plus whoever wasn't mentioned there. These 4 justices wrote an opinion in opposition, in dissent. Justice Jody Kolopen, Justice Ramaka Matopo, Justice Rishinad Segobin, and Justice Zukiza Chiki. They found that the rule was constitutional and that the court did not have jurisdiction to override the National Assembly's vote. Well, that is interesting. After all, court's supposed to have checks and balances against misuse or abuse of the law. So how can these justices find that this court didn't have the authority to override the National Assembly's vote? And they also found that the rule is constitutional. It's not, and I agree with the majority. But a minority, almost as large as the majority, found that Ramaphosa can get away with this. This is disturbing. This should have been a unanimous decision, not a split vote. And there was a third judgment by Justice Stephen Majid, along with Justices Nkosi Mlatna and Ronel Tome concurring. They agreed that the rule was unconstitutional, but for different reasons. They also held that the rule was invalid and that the independent panel's report should be referred to the impeachment committee. But 4 justices thought it was perfectly okay for Parliament to cover up what the president did. As a consequence of this case, the Speaker of the National Assembly and the President and the ANC were ordered to pay the EFF's cost. Well, there you go, folks. There you go. Wow, that's absolutely amazing. So, shocking news out of South Africa. What does it mean? It means, in effect, that Parliament must go forward with an impeachment process. However, I will say the following. The Democratic Alliance has hitched its wagon to the GNU and, by default, the African National Congress and, more importantly, Cyril Ramaphosa, who determines which are his cabinet ministers. The greedy members of the cabinet who seem to favor their role and paycheck larger than the needs of South African citizens, and I mentioned some of the things. Siviwe Garuba, her party consistently against Bella, now implementing Bella, and unashamedly doing so. John Steenhuisen, the white minister of agriculture, who neglected the foot and mouth disease that broke out years before he became the agriculture minister. Then he sat around and diddled for 16 months before he took action. Then we've got a removed minister by the DA themselves and replaced by another because of internal issues. And then we have Leon Schreiber, ostensibly the most effective minister there, but the man behind the coordination and violation of diplomatic norms under the Vienna Convention, unlawfully raiding the U.S. Embassy's diplomatic operations in Woodmead on the 16th of December on a national holiday. This is the Democratic Alliance, and the Democratic Alliance is in league with the ANC. So I suspect that it comes to an impeachment, the Democratic Alliance members of Parliament will be told that they must vote not to impeach Cyril Ramaphosa, which would effectively mean that he stays in Parliament for the rest of his term, although it's rather short. What say you, South Africa? Good news? Probably. Scary for Cyril. Now he's got to scramble. The world press is reporting on this as I speak. Cheers.